You're listening to The Luxury Item, the podcast on the business of luxury and the people and companies that are shaping the future of the luxury industry. Here's your host, Scott Kerr.
Luxury travel shows no sign of slowing down. High net worth travelers are putting what's important to them front and center of their travel plans, valuing deeper experiences that leave a positive impact, spending time with loved ones, and creating wellness moments that last well after checkout. One luxury vacation homes and rentals company, Timbers Resorts, was founded on the idea of providing luxury resort properties for families and friends to spend time together through vacation home real estate ownership and fractional ownership. Fractional ownership is a growing trend in the luxury vacation home industry that allows buyers to invest in a part of the home's equity and have an equity stake in the property. The number of weeks annually that buyers get to stay at their property depends on what percentage they own. My guest on the luxury item is Greg Spencer, Chief Executive Officer for Timbers Resorts, one of the largest independent developers and operators of private boutique resorts, rentals, and residence clubs, with locations in destinations like Aspen, Kauai, Tuscany, Cabo San Lucas, and Vail, just to name a few. Spencer is responsible for driving the company's overall strategy and growth. Throughout his 17-year tenure at Timbers, Greg has held several prominent positions in the company before being elevated to CEO. Welcome to the luxury item, Greg.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you so much for joining me. So the Timbers Company is in the business of developing and operating luxury resorts, private residence clubs, and boutique properties around the world, all of them in very highly desirable destinations. And it seems you have both a luxury property fractional ownership business and luxury vacation rental business. Can you talk about your business model and strategy?
Sure. Yeah. We are in some great locations around the world, and really, we take the approach of what's the highest and best use for that location. And in a lot of these locations, we have found that the fractional ownership or the private residence club ownership is the right type of product for the mass appeal, if you will, of the folks trying to get there. So we do have a mix of products. We have whole ownership, we have fractional, we have some hotels that we've operated, and then we also have our rental business. And what we find is that sometimes owners can't quite get to a location. We have an exchange program, and if they don't have an opportunity to use the exchange program, they can put it into our luxury rental program as well.
And where does most of your business come from? Is it from the fractional, or you have different working parts there?
I would say of the real estate sales, roughly 60% of it's been fractions, 40% has been whole ownership or lots. And, the 60% fractions, if you look at some of the areas where we fish, Aspen, Napa, Sonoma, some of it gets down to that's what the underlying zoning was for the specific property.
Right.
We are a little different than some brands because, frankly, those locales want hot keys. They don't want the big, $6-7 million home that sits there empty 50 weeks out of the year. They want people that are actually, part of their community, buying things from local merchants, going to local restaurants. They look for a little hotter keys. So that's why that mix is kind of 60-40, if you will.
Yeah, and I'm sure you get this question a lot. What are the main differences between being a fractional owner and a timeshare owner?
Yeah, timeshare is typically a week. That value some of them can be pretty low, depending upon the brand, $5,000 a week up to, call it $100,000 for a week. Typically we sell in much higher increments at much higher dollar values. So for instance, we have 1/6 that go up to $2.4 million, right? So for a 1/6 ownership. So it's a little different than a timeshare. And if you look at kind of where we're in A+ market, A+ locations where typically the timeshares aren't necessarily allowed in those markets, right? They want less intensity, if you will, and they want more hotkeys, if you will, as far as people that can spend in those markets.
I was reading an interview with you, and you said your average owner is part of the richest 0.1% to 0.5%. And say one of these potential wealthy buyers is interested in being a fractional owner at one of your luxury properties. I mean, they're already used to staying at ultra luxury hotels and resorts. They expect top of the strata services and opulent experiences. Now they want luxury property they can escape to a couple of times a year. So, as a new owner, fractional owner, what solutions and services do you bring to the table for them where they're so used to, like I said before, these top of the strata services and experiences?
I think, you attract like-minded people. We really try to focus our resorts on having a very authentic approach to the area. We want our architecture to look authentic. We want our experiences to be authentic to the area. There's not going to be any standard music track that's playing in all of our properties around the world. We're going to make sure that what we are doing is appropriate for the place. And then frankly, we take a very approachable luxury tact, if you will, to how we provide services. Our owners tend to be pretty gregarious. They like to make friends with other owners. They like to create new experiences with people that might not be who they hang out with normally. Out in Kauai, it's pretty amazing. We have a little bit of a mix. We have a couple from Houston, Texas, that have become really good friends with a couple from the Northeast, and they end up traveling together. They've actually gone to Europe and gone on other trips, and they didn't know each other before. And so I think that's who we tend to attract. And I think that's really, when you start getting into a home, it's a little different than a transient hotel that you're staying in. When people are looking for homes, they're looking for how they live their life on a normal basis, and I think that's what we try to do, is really try to focus on the authenticity. We want approachable luxury, really want to create an environment where our owners can make friends with other owners and can build those relationships. And that's why I think we have succeeded, is we find that ability to attract people that have a similar focus. Some brands, sometimes you get to that luxury quotient, some people don't want that. I call it the masters of the universe, right? They're very successful in what they do, and they want to hang out and have a very small circle of friends, and they don't necessarily like outsiders. That works for some brands. That definitely doesn't work for us. We want people that, frankly, want to not only meet other people, but also have authentic local experiences. They don't want to do the waterfall hike that's on TripAdvisor. They want to do the waterfall hike that we've curated through our local employees, and know, like, oh, this is the place you go because it's not as crowded, right? And I think that's what we try to bring in all of our different locations.
So, how does Timbers make money? So, I know you talked about the different varieties of revenue channels. So, what are the key profit drivers? Is it from the management fees on the properties that you've already sold, and premiums on selling the shares of the property? How do you make a profit?
Well, first we'll make a profit by making sure we have happy owners. 60% of our sales are referral. So, when you can hit that level of referral, that hopefully means you're doing something right.
Did you say
Uh,
60?
60,
Yeah.
is referral. And, basically, we make the bulk of our money, it's selling real estate, right? It's building new properties, either, selling to friends of our owners, or our owners buying a second interest or a third interest or a fourth home. That's how we make money. We got into the operational business really at the request of our owners. We used to actually develop our properties. We would operate them until we sold them out, and then we'd turn them over. And we had a lot of owners starting to come to us saying, hey, I got this guy now that's in charge of HOA. I don't know what he knows about hospitality, and he's making decisions on what will happen at après ski, etc. You definitely need the governance from a HOA perspective, but I think you frankly still need to have that hospitality purveyor, if you will, making sure the experience is there. So we kind of backed into being an operating company. And then the same goes for our rental business. We had owners come to us. We had set up rental companies locally, and they're like, I got this guy that never returns my calls. wants to take 50% of gross, and, you know, I don't know what they're doing from a marketing perspective. So we actually were requested by owners to start to offer rental, right? And so I think, you know, to back to your original point, the bulk of it is in the physical real estate that we develop and sell. And I said, I would tell you that really the operating business and the rental business and even our exchange business is kind of ancillary, if you will, to physically building real estate.
I want to talk about Timber's beginnings. It was founded in 1999 by David Burden. Who is he, and what opportunity did he see in the market that inspired him to come up with the idea for Timbers?
David is he was our founder, and frankly, David's a visionary, and you know, David uh, you know, is a hardcore developer, and he started uh, in life really being a big PUD developer, a big golf course developer out of Hilton Head, South Carolina. He moved out to Colorado. And I think what David saw is that exactly what I mentioned earlier. You have these beautiful homes around Aspen. We used to be based in the Aspen, Colorado area that get used, you know, 50 weeks a year. They sit empty. They get used 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks a year. And David thought that there had to be a different, higher and better use for the property. So the first project in Snowmass, Timbers Club, it was a site that frankly several developers before couldn't figure out how to make it work. It was a long rectangular site, had minimal ski in, ski out. And, you know, the traditional way of thinking is ski in, ski out's $1,000 a foot. Second row would be 800, third row would be 600, fourth row would be 400. David kind of turned that on its head. You know, he basically said, I'm going to buy this site. I'm going to put all the amenities right on the ski slope. And yeah, I'll get 6 or so units there, but 30 units won't be on the ski slope, but you will feel like you're on the ski slope. Mm-hmm. And, you know, frankly, I think David had that, you know, kind of tenacity to figure it out. And he figured out that, you know, some of these people weren't ready to have a second home or a third home in Snowmass. But they do like to vacation there, and they did not want to stay in a hotel. So that's really kind of how we got our founding, is really David just seeing that there was a higher and better use for a property, if you will, and really having the, you know, the tenacity to really try to pioneer into a new product. And you know, I frankly learned a ton with David. I worked with him for 18 years and have really tried to channel, you know, basically that kind of same spirit of like, hey, we can't be everything to everyone. We just need to be the right thing to certain ones. And that's been the approach that David always took. And that's certainly what we try to continue to do as a company.
Yeah, and now Timbers has these spectacular properties in many of the global second home hotspots in Colorado, Hawaii, Florida, California, Mexico, and Italy. Can you talk about your expansion locations in the next few years?
Absolutely. You know, we're always looking, we probably look at 100 opportunities a year. I would say 5 or 6 fit kind of our model. And then we start charging after them. We have a general idea of what we're looking for. We survey our owners every year. They're very vocal. They tell us exactly what they're looking for. So I would say currently, you know, we are very big on Costa Rica. Obviously, we have a couple properties in Hawaii. We have one in Cabo, in Mexico. And Costa Rica, you know, frankly, I've been making several trips down there. I think it's kind of coming into its own. You know, it's still very affordable down there, and you get some great authentic rainforest type experiences down there. So Costa Rica is one area. Coastal Florida, you know, we have an opportunity on Captiva Island, Florida. We're looking at other opportunities in Florida. Coastal Florida still is, you know, there's 118 million visitors a year, plus or minus, coming to Florida, and you know, you fish where there's fish, and there's a lot of still great areas. I'm a native Floridian, so I know that there's the areas that everybody's heard of, and I know there's other great opportunities within the state. And then, you know, we continue to look overseas, specifically in London, Paris type of environment. I was in London a couple of weeks ago, and I think that would be something that would really complement our Italian property. We looked at some other opportunities in Tuscany as well. So I would say, those are kind of the opportunities, is getting some global cities such as a New York, London, Paris, getting some other beach locations, whether it be Florida or Costa Rica, and then frankly, Jackson Hole, Wyoming, Big
Yeah.
Sky, Montana. Those are areas that, frankly, I think have really come into their own, and would provide a complement to the properties that we have in Colorado.
What about breaking into the Asia Pacific region? Is that on your radar, like Bali or Phuket?
We've looked at some of those. We certainly have pursued opportunities before, uh, in frankly some different locations. But it's really hard to be actionable on that unless you're in that market, and I think that's a little bit of the challenge, is just making sure that you can be there frequently enough to be actionable. So that might be a situation where we need to try to partner with someone to kind of break into the Pacific realm, if you will.
I want to step back for a second. The macro environment has changed a lot in the last few years. And towards the end of last year, U.S. vacation home sales fell by nearly three-quarters from their frenzied pace 3 years ago. The reduction comes after a fervor of real estate investment in vacation locales during the pandemic. Those with means jumped on low mortgage costs and higher savings rates. An inventory shortage spawned a wrenching correction in the second homes market. How has that impacted your business?
Honestly, we haven't really been impacted. If you look at the level we fly at, we're at a pretty high net worth level. Our folks don't necessarily finance; they pay cash to us. Now, that doesn't mean they don't, borrow on, from a investment margin account or a line of credit that they have. But we typically don't see any financing, so we haven't really been impacted by that. Frankly, the impact we had, we were down not quite 20% year over year for 23 compared to 22. It was more inventory. That was our biggest issue, is that, frankly, the people that bought during COVID, they don't want to sell. They've
Right.
fallen in love with that area, so they're not really turning it over. In some of our locations, for us to make a sale, it's a three-way type of transaction of getting people to move up through product and really kind of creating some inventory, if you will. I certainly think that might change. What we typically find is that, our fractional product and our whole ownership product will have people move from fraction to whole. We'll have people that had a whole ownership that moved down to fraction because they just can't get to that locale fast enough. So that does kind of keep us from having some variations, because we get some movement between product, if you will. So we haven't had the same impact, knock on wood. Frankly, even after the global financial crisis, we saw that our people were more impacted by liquidity than they were necessarily with market gyrations. Our folks are pretty savvy business owners, and so the only issue they had was frankly, end of 2008, early 2009, when there was a liquidity crisis.
Mhm.
But once the government stepped in and kind of reinflated the liquidity, our folks really, by the middle of 2009, they were back to buying. And I think it really ties back to, I'd like to say we're super smart, but it really ties back to, we really focus on multi-generational travel. We focus on multi-generational travel since the inception. And, it's easy if you're dual income, no kids, you can convince your wife or significant other to, not take a trip for a couple of years. But, like, I have a 10-year-old and a 14-year-old, I'm not putting vacations on hold for 2 or 3 years because something happened in market. I'm gonna find a way to take a trip, right? And I think that's that really helps smooth out some of those market gyrations. The fact that we are multi-generational focus, and the fact that folks at the net worth we're selling to have the financial capacity to kind of ride out some of the fluctuations.
On average, about how many different families get in on one single home?
That doesn't happen frequently. What happens more frequently is it's either the the grandparents are buying it because they want to have a place where they can get, the kids and the new grandkids together, or vice versa. The kid buys it because they want to have a place where the grandparents can come experience a locale with their kids. So it's very infrequently that we will get multiple family members to buy in the same interest. Now, we do have family members that will buy at the same resort. On Kauai, we have multiple families where the parents own a whole ownership and their kids bought a fractional. So when the grandkids and the kids come out, they kind of have their own space, but they're still at the same resort. We do get that, but we don't have a lot of people kind of partnering up, if you will, to buy an interest. Yeah, our fractions are typically 1/6 to 1/8. So you could have te 6 to 8 different families, but keep in mind, in our program, you buy into the program, it's not you're deeded into a specific home, but you can use any of them, and we manage that, and so that way it does give you a lot of flexibility because you have the benefit of deeded ownership, but you aren't restricted to, wow, I better make sure I work it out with the other 5 people that are in this home. We manage all that for you.
So is financing trickier for fractional buyers, or do most of them just pay cash?
Most of them pay cash. I can tell you financing is trickier. Look, there were some products that, didn't work as whole ownership and they shouldn't have worked as fractional. There were, what we found is that you got to really keep the number of units that could be sold fractions down. You just get into the law of big numbers. Back when this first kind of kicked off in the early 2000s, you had some clubs that were, 54 units, 70 units, and then at a 112. So you were talking anywhere from, 650 to, 1,000 owners. And the issue there is you just get in the law of big numbers, right? Like think of 1,000 people, 100 unfortunately going through a divorce, 200 might be retiring, 200 have kids that are off in college, and it really does kind of, once you get to a big number, it moves around. So what we try to do, we've learned, we've tried to do with our new clubs, try to keep the fractional units down to somewhere around 20, and we try to keep the total number of interests around 100 to 120, 140. And we find that that's more manageable because you just don't get into that kind of turnover, right? And we found that it's a just more resilient product. So sometimes, less is more. This is one of those instances.
Do you have buyers coming in looking at it as an investment product?
We try to dissuade them as an investment product. Well, I'll qualify that. If they're making an investment in their family and create memories, we 100% try to sell them that way. If they're looking at it as, well, I'm going to own this, and then, I'll use 3 weeks, and then I'll rent 2 weeks, and then, that's not the right way to look at it. The way we look at it is, it's you only got, when you're at that net worth, you only have X amount of time to spend with your family, and that's what we really try to sell is, the opportunity to see your granddaughter, ski down her first black run, or see your grandson, make his first birdie, or, any of those other types of things that we try to do at our properties. And that's frankly what we sell. And look, there's always something cheaper. We're never going to be the cheapest alternative, and we don't try to be the cheapest alternative. We want to make sure that we're delivering the appropriate experience for what people are paying for, but we don't apologize about the fact that you have to pay to get a certain experience, and that we're in the business of making money, and that we have to we have to 100% deliver what we say we're going to deliver. But I just think that that's where some things fall apart, is where people get super price sensitive, and it's kind of like a race to the bottom, and then you start carving out certain experiences, and the next thing you know, you just have a fraction of something that doesn't have services, and it's not really a resilient type of experience.
So when Timbers is exploring a new city to develop a luxury property, are the city zoning laws more or less favorable to co-ownership companies versus developing full ownership homes? And what kind of regulations do you have to deal with?
So it really depends on the locale. We used to be in the Aspen area. We used to joke that you get one fee simple unit for every year you go through zoning, right? So, if you want to wait 20 years, you might get a 20 unit development. Aspen really wants to see kind of hot keys. They want to see people that are there and dining in local restaurants and purveying from local merchants. And that's for the most part what you see. So our zoning, we basically, in some locales, were considered a commercial zoning, and other locales were considered, accessory residential. So it really just depends by market. But on the whole, once we talk communities through the demographic profile of our owners and our occupancy rates and kind of how they use it, they get behind it. And also a lot of our product, people will actually move into the community. That's happened a lot in Steamboat Springs. We had a lot of folks that initially bought a fractional, then they moved up to whole ownership at our property, and then now they've bought ranches in the local community and other homes in the local community, and many times they've kept their fractional or kept their whole ownership for the guests and friends coming through. So it really does create an opportunity for sustained growth, if you will, in the local markets where we have properties.
And a home is the most emotional asset there is for most people. So any new home ownership model may ruffle some feathers. I'm sure Timbers is not immune to that. One of the arguments against fractional ownership is that it's difficult to resell the property, that the premiums we spoke about earlier on their properties at the time of purchase. So you could end up overpaying up front, which automatically puts you behind the property's appreciation, and that there is simply very little demand for fractional ownerships when they're being resold. How do you respond to those concerns?
I think it depends on the program. Frankly, luckily I have a roofer on a lot of properties, so I get visibility into what things, take Timbers Club, for example. When we sold that back in, the early 2000s, that was trading anywhere between high twos, low threes, right? For a 1/8 fraction. Now they're trading north of 600,000. So, it has gotten the appreciation. I think it really depends on the property and the market. We have seen some of the larger brands had more of a system-centric fractional model, and they had calendars that really weren't flexible. They had calendars that you better know what you're doing 12 years from now because you've already gotten your weeks allotted to you. We don't have that. What we typically do is we have a floating program. So every year people get to ask, they get to tell us what their top three picks are for their number one pick, for their number two pick. And we go through and mash that up. And frankly, we create a product that works for them. But without a doubt, there are some fractional products out there, depending upon how they were originally constructed, that could be difficult to sell. We haven't seen that for our true floating product. But again, it is kind of market specific.
I want to talk about luxury hospitality. Top service at luxury hotels and resorts is born out of strong cultures. This creating a culture of excellence where both creativity and effort are brought to bear on both the day-to-day of everything as well as when things go horribly wrong. And for many luxury guests, these intangibles are what they're paying for. It's not just the glitzy amenities, it's about the compound effect of many human interactions during the course of a stay. What is Timbers Luxury Hospitality secret sauce for turning a one-off resort customer into one that is obsessed with the Timbers brand for life?
I think the biggest thing is engagement. You got to engage with your owners. You got to engage with your guests. You have to know what's going on in their life. You have to know that, that someone's son might be proposing to his girlfriend on the trip, or We've had folks where, out in Hawaii, football games come on at 10 a.m. sometimes, and we know someone's a big, Texas A&M fan. And so we had one time where we had the TV set up and everything was ready for them to watch the game, and it's those little things. Sometimes it's the funniest thing. We sold a pretty significant townhome in Kauai, and it was because the gentleman, we actually had our weekly owner event. We had where you had to earn your drink. So we had a bike that had a blender on it, and you had to like pedal to mix up your drink. And this guy thought it was the most hilarious thing ever. And he basically said, "All right, well, look, I'm going to buy this townhouse, but I want to have that." He connects in a different way, and that's what we try to do. Is we try to really impress upon our team. You have to engage with the owners. You have to engage with the folks that are there on a guest visit program that are looking at real estate ownership. And frankly, when owners are there and they bring their friends to these events and they see that engagement and they see, the waterfall tours, or, the owners free golf on Tuesdays, they start to see those kind of things. And that's where they start to get in that mindset of, well, I can see myself here too. And I think that's the biggest thing is we always have to make sure we're engaged. Problems happen. When problems happen, we got to own it 100%, and we have to push our team and make sure that they have the right training and skills to be successful. But at the end of the day, I used to get every single quality score that came in through our company. It's gotten a little overwhelming, so I more sample them. But I can tell instantly when there's a problem, whether we engage with that owner or that guest or not. You can see it instantly in the comments. So I think that's the expectation, is the team knows that I review those. And I think the expectation is that, we have to engage. I'd like to say we have some really sophisticated training manuals and big, thick brand standard guidelines. We don't, but we do try to guide. We try to put the curbs on the road for our team so they understand, the key things that they have to do. But we do want them to be authentic. We do want them to be themselves. And frankly, take our property over in Italy. We were the #1 resort in Europe 5 years in a row by Travel and Leisure, #2 hotel in the world, and we're not a hotelier, and
Right.
and frankly, we did it because we had 100% Italian staff. We basically put the curbs on the road and we let them be themselves. And I think that's the key, is making sure you're engaged, making sure you're giving your team the tools to be successful, but you're also letting them be who they are within reason, and that was the other thing. Is we took over a property from a big brand, and I was out in Hawaii and I noticed that everybody had, it's hotter than blazes, and they all had the long sleeves on and everything else. And I said, well, what's going on with the long sleeves? And they're like, oh, well, it's the standards. You can't have any tattoos. Well, look, I definitely don't want a tattoo with a skull with a snake coming out of it with a knife through it. But, out in Hawaii, the tattoos have a story. They
Yes,
have
right.
a cultural significance. And I don't want someone to not be a Hawaiian, I still want them to have that. So we instituted a policy that, like, hey, you could have it as long as it was tasteful and respectful. And at any point in time, we reserve the right to tell you have to put the sleeves on, but we didn't try to assimilate them to our culture. We tried to make sure that we were fitting within their culture. And I find when you treat people to respect that way, and you kind of take that approach, that in return, they'll turn on the maximum aloha to your guests because they feel happy and valued to be there.
One of the biggest trends that continues to unfold is the rise of experiential luxury, where the wealthy are shifting from owning to being. While much of the growth in the sector has been in luxury goods, luxury hospitality is up, gourmet food and fine dining is up, luxury cruise is up, luxury expeditions are booming. Is there any concern that the memories that the ultra affluent want to create are from ongoing new luxury travel experiences and perhaps not being tied down to a vacation home, even if it is 1 or 2 times a year?
I will tell you the average owner before they buy from us owns 2.81 homes. So, people aren't trying to have a third home in Hawaii, or a fourth home in Aspen, or a fifth home in Tuscany. So I think we do already fit with that. I think, particularly when you're talking point 1 to point 5 socioeconomic, people are going to have their primary home. They're going to have their second home. They might even have a third home. But they don't want to stay in a hotel when they're going to some of these locations, and they want to feel like their home when they go to these locations. So I do think our product fits with that. I also think that, again, if you're creating those authentic experiences, we get pitched all the time of like, oh, the latest thing to do with hot chocolate is X, Y, and Z. We don't. We just want to have great hot chocolate. We want it to be, accessible and comfortable and easy to get to when you're in the mountains, but we kind of try to steer a little away from the faddish stuff. And, we don't want to do token luxury. We want to do authentic luxury. And frankly, one of the craziest things that we've done is we created a farm out of a fallow golf course out in Kauai, and we've let our owners plant trees. We'll do a dedication ceremony, and a Hawaiian, blessing is it's a spiritual experience. And we've had different people have had different health scares or different things in life, or they've lost someone. And, it sounds simple, but planting a cocoa palm tree or banana tree or something out there that, really shows, hey, this is our home, has really resonated with people. So, I would say that I'll take something like that before whatever the latest influencer is peddling, because frankly, we find as that stuff gets faddish, and the concept of putting down roots, the concept of being able to go back and check on the growth of something that represents your family is a lot more impactful. So, I'm not saying that we could do that at every property, but we try to find those types of things that are enduring, if you will, versus fleeting.
And we're seeing more providers in the private aviation and yachting industries offering these lifestyle perks and programs to the ultra high net worth customers as a way to keep them engaged. They're collaborating with high end purveyors to provide customers with access to a wide spectrum of luxury experiences. Does Timber partner with brands to provide these type of lifestyle offerings to its wealthy private residence club members?
We do. We have partnerships. It's probably an area where we should put more focus. But we've had a great long-standing partnership with Sentient Jets. They've been a great partner of ours, and frankly, our buyers are their buyers, and vice versa. But I do think that that's something that we should probably put a little more attention and focus to. We do have a property in Italy. We sold the hotel to Belmont and LVMH, and
Yep.
I think we do a phenomenal job of pulling their brand through their property. And frankly, it took them a second to realize, wow, these folks that own these Casali really are our buyers of our goods. And I think once that kind of clicked in, they really started working more closely with us. But yeah, I think it again, it's more of the fact that it's just similarities. That's what people gravitate to. We used to have a partnership with BMW where we did a BMW drive experience for our owners. And I remember talking to the BMW marketing company, and I'm like, look, I can tell you we have a high propensity BMW ownership. I didn't realize that of our database, 90% were either current or former BMW owners. And that got their attention when they saw that it was that level of concentration. And they weren't just 90% BMW purchasers, they were 90% 7 Series, M5, X7, some of their highest vehicle purchasers. So, which makes sense when you look at the socioeconomic. So I think that's something that frankly we should probably do a better job of. But I do think that as long as it's complementary, I think it makes sense to do that. I would hate to just go out and have a list of luxury stuff and like, oh, we're gonna have this and we're gonna have this and we're gonna have that. We try not to do that.
So, Greg, what do you see as the big luxury travel themes this year and even into 2025?
It's frankly what we've been doing for a while. I think the multi-generational traveler is the right approach. I think David got it right 25 years ago, and I think it's going to endure for the next 25 years, particularly with the baby boomer population. A lot of them now they've started to retire. They really want to connect with their family. Maybe they put too many hours in when they were working, and now's the opportunity to make time for the grandkids and to really have that alternative vacation experience. So I think the multi-generational traveler, I think it's been here for a while. We've been doing it for 25 years, and I think it's here to stay. Sustainable luxury, that's sometimes that could be overblown, but I just call it doing the right thing, at all times. And like, for instance, we have farms where we do, use our own produce over in Italy. At one point in time had 4,200 acres, and we pressed our own olives. We harvested our own truffles. Everything from right there. I think that's the way to go. We've always done the beach cleanups. We've always tried to be good stewards of our land. So I just call that doing the right thing. And then finally, I do think there's an opportunity to really make sure that the authenticity. We find a lot of people are really looking for that authentic environment, and frankly, we encourage our team to make sure we're always treating the local community with respect, right? Whether it's, the Pepsi truck delivery guy or whomever, because, there's that old adage, you only know when you make the sale, you never know when you lose it. And so you want to make sure that when people are, in a surf lineup with locals, that, we have a good reputation, or Pono and Hawaiian, and you always want to make sure that you fit with the local environment, right? That doesn't mean that, there's going to be some not my backyard folks, but we always try to make sure that we're treating the shop owners, the folks that supply our properties with respect. And we find that if you have a good reputation locally, that helps. Then that way our owners don't feel alienated. They can ask people, where's the best, waterfall hike? Where's the best place to go get this? And sometimes it's those hole in the wall places that provide the best, most memorable experience.
We've been seeing the fractional ownership model expanding its horizons to luxury cars, private jets, art, super yachts, etc. Do you think this modern method of sharing high ticket assets is just a passing trend, or is there exponential growth potential there?
I think in the right application, it makes a ton of sense. Like I've even, talked about, locally, like I have young kids, they all have sports. I'd love to have a ski nautique towboat, right? But the practical sense of me says, well, I'm going to use that thing, 20 days a year. Like at certain applications, it totally makes sense. A private jet makes sense, like particularly living in the Aspen area before, you see, I get it. If you can own it, why not own it? But, it just sits there. And it's kind of like the whole reason why David got into this to start with is that, there's a higher and better use for an asset. So I think that makes sense. The art, I don't quite follow, but, I guess you could do that. But, definitely for the luxury cars like Turo, that's been wildly successful. Definitely, the fractional jet space is pretty fractured, but you got the sentience and you got the net jets, and those certainly make a lot of sense. And definitely the super yachts, I think that's something that makes a lot of sense. And I think real estate's right there if you provide the right structure and the right application of it.
So, Greg, my final question is the luxury item question, which I ask all my guests. So, if you were stranded on a deserted island and you could only have one single luxury item with you, what would that luxury item be? It can't be any form of air or water transportation to get you off that island, or anything that requires mobile service so you can call somebody to get you off that island. It's just you, lonely you on this island with lots of sand, palm trees, miles and miles of ocean, but you have one luxury item with you. What would that be?
That's a tough one. I was going to tell you teleportation, but that sounds like that would be cheating.
Oh, now you're going into Star Trek territory.
That way you could have the best of both worlds, right? I would have to say I love to run, I love to work out, so I would have to say Apple Watch, if I had headsets with it, would be an Apple Music. That would be if I had that, I could be on the deserted island and be just fine.
Greg Spencer, Chief Executive Officer, Timbers Resorts. Thank you so much for joining me on the luxury item.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
That's it for this episode of the Luxury Item Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this useful and entertaining, I would be really grateful if you can share it with a friend or colleague. I would love it if you subscribe so you never miss an episode. And while you're there, be sure to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It really helps other listeners find us. The Luxury Item Podcast is a production of Silvertone Consulting. I'm your host, Scott Kerr. Until next time.